I'm Shobha Purushothaman. I am an entrepreneur, but I've spent the last 25 years in the media and marketing industries in Asia, in Europe, and in the US. And after having spent 25 years in media and marketing, I wanted a new challenge, and so I moved to India, where I've never lived before, about a year ago, and have just launched a training and education business aimed at giving young people the skills they need to build careers that are meaningful.
My name is Satish Mishra. I'm the CEO of a company called Strategic Asia. We focus on India, China and Indonesia particularly, and work in a range of sectors, starting from energy, food, education, health and infrastructure.
My name is Juan Carlos Belloso. I'm a place branding expert, working for Barcelona many years to develop the brand in Barcelona, but also helping other cities from Latin America to Siberia. So this is my main expertise, is trying to understand what makes places different, how to be able to deliver and show that to the rest of the world.
Yeah, my name's Greg Clark. I live in London in the UK. I'm a mentor for cities around the world, and I really work with cities on long-term strategy and leadership and long-term investment issues. Well, when one thinks about Denmark, at least in my experience as someone who's been to that wonderful country quite a few times, I think firstly of a historic nation that played a very important part in the evolution of civilization and culture in Europe. I think of a Nordic country which is somehow conditioned by its cold weather and by its particular climate. I think of a people who have been traditionally very open to the rest of the world and very engaged in the global sphere. I think of a country which these days is relatively small, but because it's small, has focused very much on leading edges in technology, leading edges in culture, leading edges in science, medicine, actually in governance as well.
I think the first thing that comes to mind is the cleanness, and it could be a function of living in India. But you know, I think of clean lines, I think of minimalism, I think of fresh, cold, but not in a crisp, you know, not in a negative sense.
Well, luckily I went in summer, so the memories are very good. What sticks in mind is tremendous hospitality and enormous amounts of fish and salmon in particular.
I think when you think about Denmark, you think about Norway, you think about Sweden, you think about this Nordic design, I would say.
Yeah.
Think about this type of progressive society, culture, education, etc. Or not specific to Denmark, but I think it's linked very much to this regional brand. And then there are some specifics about Denmark. So I think they are very strong points. I think these are positive concepts associated to a certain region, while some other regions that we know very good have very bad stereotypes, and that's a major difficulty when you start talking about it. In this case, I think the starting point is very good, and it's a point that is really based on real attributes of that.
I also think of as a brand attribute of the people, I think of directness. I think of sort of, you know, as the Americans would say, cut to the chase. It's either yes or no. I also think about design aesthetics.
Well, the one challenge, of course, is that there is, you know, in every area you can think of, whether it is manufacturing, whether it is services, whether it is in creative industry, you know, essentially there are all kinds of new brands which are coming onto the global market, and so it's now a much more crowded business environment. For example, even the very large Indian companies like the Tatas and the Birlas and the whole series of others, a few years ago were very large companies, but they were not global companies. They were catering to the Indian market. Now they've actually become aggressively global. so that you have Tata's running, having bought out Jaguar and Range Rover, and therefore they become household names in the West, which was not the case. So in the same way, you find that in the Nordic countries' case, they have a number of very good brands. Nokia on the one side and Volvo on the other. But they're finding that in Asian markets, they have to compete now with new Chinese cars. They have to compete with Indian cars and so on. So I think the name recognition in the future will not be as easy as it used to be in the past.
In my experience, India actually has a fairly strong, the business community at least, has a fairly strong sense of awareness about Scandinavia. Some Scandinavian companies have a fairly strong presence, especially in the manufacturing sector. In fact, in our first client in our training business is a Finnish company called Kone Cranes. And so you do have quite a big Scandinavian community there in the business world. Outside of that, I don't think there's a general awareness of Scandinavia as a region.
All of us have a strong identity, different things to offer, but the main problem is that people don't know about us. And most of the images are based on the stereotypes of some things that we have heard about the country, etc. So Barcelona had the same problem as many places. At the very beginning is that we had many things to explain, but nobody knew about us. So I think the major challenge is try to understand who are these unique things you have, and how are you going to be able to explain that to the world and make sure that everybody is interested in your place. So this is the major challenge.
I think the whole issue of how second-tier cities are defined in relation to the capital city becomes a big problem when you're looking at overall populations which are very small. Because if you go to the Nordic countries in particular, the first-tier cities are just so much bigger than the second-tier cities and absorb a very large percentage of the population. I think the issue is quite different when you go to large countries in terms of population in Asia, where the second-tier cities themselves may be several times larger than the first-tier cities elsewhere. So I think a lot depends on the overall population and also the history in a way.
I think a number of the countries and governments and cities are definitely positioning themselves as it's an easy place for you to come and do business. There's a vibrant market here. We are doing well. So I think that's one of the buckets that a number of people seem to be attaching themselves to.
But people who don't know Denmark, and many of these will be people who are in emerging economies or faster growing economies, markets where there hasn't been a lot of exposure to Danish companies, Danish product or Danish brands, they really will not know very much. They will see Denmark as a very small country in an ancient continent called Europe, where population is declining, where share of global GDP is declining, where there's a sense that Europe's story is a story about the past and not about the future. And for those people, Denmark will either be a place they don't know at all, or very much a blank sheet of paper. So in that context, I think it's very important to reintroduce Denmark to the world. And the process of introducing Aarhus to the world requires us to make almost no assumptions about what is already known.